This video will cover bones and basic animation. Last time we left off, we gave the footman a beard, new armor, and learned how to make weapon meshes out of a single panel. Today we're going to explain how bones, reference nodes, and keyframes work. In order to animate a model, you must first give it bones. A single solitary bone is called a root. On its own, it can only perform limited functions such as rotating, moving, and inflating. In order to animate something like an arm, you will need a skeleton. In order to create a bone, left-click and drag over the polygons you want the bone to appear on, press Create, and press Bone. Now we have a root. If I try to animate this now, you'll see that the mesh does not move with the bone. This is because we need to bind the mesh to the bone. Select the mesh, and press this button here. Now it moves as intended. In order to create a bending motion, select the joint of your mesh and create a new bone. If you try to animate it just like this, you'll notice that the new bone is not moving at all with the old bone. That's because all we've technically done here is created two roots, and not a skeleton. In order to make a basic skeleton, select the bone, press T, and then select the root, press T again. With the lesser bone connected to the root, its motions will be linked to the rest of the model now. Anything that the root does now, the lesser bone will do also. In order to animate bones, go to Modules, Sequence Editor, Anims. On the right here, go to All Line, and down to the animation you want to be working in. Select Movement, click on the bone, press R or left-click the button up here, and now holding Shift, left-click and drag to rotate the bone. You can change the axis by clicking XY to rotate something around, ZX to rotate something up and down, and YZ to rotate it around. This down here is the animation bar. This red line is the keyframe you're actively viewing. These blue lines over here are keyframes. Keyframes are the motions that a model will actively move through during an animation. Your beginning keyframe right here and the ending keyframe right here must be identical to each other in order for the animation to loop properly. Right here we have half of our selection bent up, and right here it's bent down. You can also snap your keyframe selection, this thing right here, to the nearest keyframe, that would be, in this case, the very beginning and this very first keyframe here, by left-clicking on the area just underneath. Doing this will move your selection left and right to the nearest keyframes. If I wanted to move the root bone here, and I began at this keyframe, not the one at the very beginning of the animation, let's say I move it like this, and I hit play, what ends up happening is because I didn't give it a flat keyframe, in this case on the very beginning and on the very end, all this bone has to go off of is the data I gave it right in the middle. Left-click on the bar down here to automatically select the very first keyframe. We're going to level this, and now you can copy animations by pressing C, going to click over here, and Control V. So now, if I press play, this will happen. So now I can animate this like an arm. So this is what the bones look like on the inside for an arm motion. Mechanically identical to an arm. On your model, you'll see these strangely shaped bones. This is called a reference node. The game will look for these points when using attachments such as orb effects, auras, and where a building should catch fire when damaged. Right here is an example of Sprite First Ref. This is where the first fire will start when the barracks is damaged. Origin Ref is where effects like Devotion Aura will appear. Here's an example of it. Overhead Ref is where effects like Inner Fire will appear. Like so. Sprite's Rally Point Ref is where building waypoint flags will appear. Like so. Here's where it will appear if you right-click on the ground. On a human, it will appear on overhead. And when I right-click on the building, it appears on that ref. Right here. Sprite first, second, and third are where the building will catch fire when damaged. So right here, there's a Sprite First ref. So if this takes a little bit of damage, it will catch fire here. Interestingly enough, Sprite First and Sprite Fourth will actually both catch fire at this stage, not just one. Hands Right Ref and Hands Left Ref are where effects like Bloodlust will appear on a model. Here's an example. Weapon Ref is where effects like the Orb of Fire will appear. Here's an example. For now though, let's give the footman a new standing animation. Actually first let's delete these weapons. Alright, we're going to keep the sword for now. So save before you do anything else. Now modules, sequence editor, and we're going to go to stand 1. Now, if we go to movement, you will see a rather intimidating mess of bones around here, just scattered all over. This is due to Blizzard's old method of animating, where you'd have redundant bones, and truth be told, I couldn't tell you why. So we're going to go to bones. These bones right here used to be the sheathed sword. We're going to delete these bones. Just left click on them and press delete on your keyboard, or this button just over here. This bone right here, I believe, used to be a scabbard, which, if it ever was animated, I could never tell. So we're going to delete that as well. This bone right here, I'm not totally sure what it is, but because it's off to the left, I can only assume that it's the water skin. We're going to delete that. Now is where it gets kind of hairy. Alright, so you can see right here that this is the shoulder mesh bone. This is the actual shoulder. This is what bends and rotates, and this is what's going to move the arm. Right here, we're going to take that, highlight the geosets it's attached to. There we are. Now, with this bone selected right here, so this lights up red, we're going to left click and drag and select this entire part of the arm, including down just about to the forearm here. Again, holding down shift and left clicking and dragging. And bind all of these to this bone here with this button here. Now we can safely delete this redundant bone here. With these dotted lines, you can see what bone is connected to what. For whatever reason, the elbow is connected to something way up here. So we're going to click on the elbow and find this. So this is what the elbow mesh is actually bound to. We're going to move it. We're going to press the Q key, or the movement key right here. Hold down shift. Left click and drag it over using YZ. And move this down here just so we can find it very easily. Now we're going to do this for the rest of the bones and get them untangled here. Okay, the skeleton has been untangled. Now, like before, we're going to select the bones that are supposed to actually bend here. And to make them no longer rely on this redundant bone, click it, hold down shift and left click and drag over the entire mesh that it's attached to, and bind it. Once that's done, press A, left click on the redundant bone and press delete. Sometimes, and this only applies to upper legs, the thighs in particular, this will break horribly. I do not know why. If that does happen to your model, again, be sure to have saved beforehand, and then just close, reload, and yeah, we'll have to just learn to live with this particular bone with any model that does that. But in this case, we're alright, so we can delete this. Now what I'm going to do here, as you can see, when I bound those bones together on the left leg, right here it says there's only one bone for these two polygons. We actually want these to share the bones between the left leg and the right leg, so that way when he takes a step, his groin doesn't tear, basically. So with these two selected, press this button right here. This will add your selected bone to the list of bones down here. If you press this one right here, it overwrites them, all of them, to only reference the bone you have selected. So again, just click on the bone that you want it to be sharing with, select the polygons, and press this button here. Alright, the skeleton has been simplified. Let's see if I got it all. Oop. Alright, I've mucked up part of the shoulder there. Ah, I see what I did. I bound part of the cape to it by accident. Easy fix. I'm going to select chest main, and by the way, if your model does have a redundant bone in the chest that the chest mesh is bound to, don't actually delete that one. You will want to keep that, because if you go to bind things to bone underscore chest, which is where the actual chest motion comes from, that one, like the thighs, has an unusually high chance of actually breaking your model. So if you have one of these, just use that instead. So I'm going to select that. Click on the cape that I accidentally missed. And I'm going to bind these to the chest. Just like that. So now the entire back of the body is bound to the chest bone. You saw me deleting the bones that were connected to the pommel and the two ends of the sword. That's actually what was keeping those knobs onto the sword. So we're going to go back to bones, uncheck these until we find the sword. Oh, there it is. Alright. Press A, click on the sword bone right here, which is just called Cone 11. We'll rename that to sword. Press enter to save the name. Left click and drag over the misbehaving polygons and bind them. Now that should no longer be goofy. Alright, now that we've simplified the skeleton and it's bound correctly, so that way, even when playing a regular animation, it still moves properly, there are two ways to create a custom standing animation. We can either modify the existing one right here, or we can create one from scratch. Right now I'm going to show you just how to modify one. Well, because he's holding his sword like an idiot here. Also, down here you'll see controller type. This actually changes the motion of your bone. We want this, for every single bone we edit, to say linear. Now, toggling between the three work planes here and using the rotating tool, we're going to move these so that way he no longer holds his sword in such a strange way. Now for this sword here, you'll see that we don't actually have a bone that we can use to rotate the sword hand. We're going to make one here. So go to bones. Now we're only going to select the geosets that have the hand and the sword. No, you know what? Just the hand. Alright, click and drag across the wrist because this is where it's going to bend. Create, bone. We're just going to call it right wrist. Press enter. Now, again, press T and link it to the bone above. Now, select the entire hand and press this button here to bind it. Press T, press T now to attach it to the elbow above. And press T again to confirm. Now, if you want to rebind a bone that is already connected to something, in this instance, it'll be hand right ref. Press this button right here. That will detach it and make it free floating. Press T, click on the bone, and press T again. Alright, now find the geoset with the sword. There it is. And with the wrist bone selected, click and drag across the entire sword and bind it. Now we have a bone we can use. Notice that it actually shifts really starkly, like it wants to really stretch and collapse in on itself there. To fix that, go back to bones, click on the elbow right here. Now left click and drag across the wrist, and merely add this bone to the wrist with this button here. Right there, that's two bones, one selection, good. So now when we rotate it, it's a little smoother. Now with that done, click on the last keyframe here. Again, using the little selection trick down here by left clicking on the empty space below. Press C, go to the very beginning frame, Control V. So now he should loop between that pose. You'll see here he kind of shifts forward a bit, right? And sticks his arm out. That's because we've got a lot of keyframes here that actually reference the old animation, the old pose that he had before. So just click the bones that are moving, highlight KF, that's highlighted keyframe. So now we are only being shown the keyframes that this bone is actively being told to rotate on. We're going to delete all of these in the middle. And the same with the chest. Other arm as well. So now when we hit play, he's no longer holding his swords in a kind of strange manner, but with the old footman half crouch combined with the regal hata of the way he's holding his swords right now, but with the footman half crouch he was in before, it doesn't really look quite right. Nobody stands like this. So what we're going to do is delete all of the keyframes here. And by all I mean every last one, including the beginning and the end. And now we're going to animate his stance from scratch. We're going to start by selecting the root bone. And let's turn him this way a bit, right? So that's on the XY axis using the rotating tool. We're going to turn his head to face us. Angle his swords down because it's a bit odd to point your weapons at somebody at a right angle. At least when you don't mean to kill them. Grab a leg, rotate that to face us just a bit. Grab the other leg, rotate it away. Now we're going to grab the move button right here. On YZ, hold down left shift, left click and drag outwards. And for the other hip bone here, again, same deal, press move or Q, and drag that out a bit. So his new standing animation is almost done. Of course, we've got to hide the bones right there. That'll be done afterwards. Okay, so the new stand 1 animation, as far as movement goes, this is done. Now back to the standing animation, just to make sure that the bones back here aren't here forever. You would find out in wireframe view which one of these geosets are his bones, in this case, bones 3. Make sure that you have the first frame selected, and underneath visibility, click this off on beginning and end. So when you hit play, there you go. His corpse is no longer showing during his new standing animation. We're also going to do that for the floating sword here. Again, in order to make sure that this stays off, make it visible at the very end and then invisible again. This ensures that it stays gone when you go to use it in-game. Save. But for now, we will copy the ending keyframe, which is the one we've been working on here, and paste it in the beginning keyframe. Now click the exact middle, which right here would say 917. Right here, there's the frame count. We're at 918, let's bump that back to 17. There we are. We're going to press A, click on this, press Q, raise his body up just a bit. Again, make sure that it's linear right here. So now when we play, well, actually, like that, it might be a little bit too subtle. Drag it up just a bit more. There we are. So now his body is actually bobbing with his breath. It still looks a little bit static though, so we're going to make his chest roll backwards just a little bit by using the rotating tool on ZX. Drag it back just 1 or maybe 2 points here. That's a little better. Now we're going to add motion to his shoulders. On an inhale, we're going to select his shoulders, and with ZX, we're going to move them down. On the exhale, right here, we're going to move them up. So we're going to leave the right one untouched and the left one is touched, and this is what it looks like. We want to get that sort of motion on both shoulders. And what I've done here is I've put this motion in between the very beginning and the very middle. Alright, we're breathing some life into this guy. Now let's select the footman's head. And on rotation, we're going to make him look a little bit down during the inhale. Deselect that. Make sure, again, linear. And on the exhale, make him look a little bit up. And this is how you would do a standing animation from scratch. Now, obviously his lower body isn't moving at all, but in-game he's only going to be about this big. So that's what we need. Now about the cape. Right here, the cape is effectively a piece of steel. It's not flapping at all in the wind. So what we're going to do is go to Bones. Now deselect any of the geosets that are not in reference to the cape itself. Here it is, okay. We're going to left click on the very top of the cape, the center top of the cape right here. Go to create bone. We're going to call this cape top. All right, hit enter to save the name. Now, with the newly created bone selected, press T and bind it to the chest right down here. Just like that. And binds the cloth below cape top to it. So that would be these 3 folds of cloth, here, here, and here. Binds these to this. All right. Now select this spot here, and the one right down here, hit create new. Because these 2 polygons were far apart, when we hit create new, it created a bone in the middle as a compromise. That's what we want. This we will call cape bottom. Alright, press T, binds that to the top of the cape. Good. And binds all the rest of the cape to cape bottom down here. And just to make it smooth, we're going to select cape top. Some of the bottom, like that. And cape bottom, we will give a little bit of the top up here. Just like that. So now, top and bottom bones are sharing the middle of the cape. Go to animations, show all of course. Now under movement, we'll grab the top of the cape, and with ZX, we're going to use the rotating bone and move it upwards and backwards like that. That was just done by left clicking and dragging. And the same with the bottom of the cape right there. So now, it flows out from behind him. We press C, copy and paste it at the end. Good. With only that keyframe done, it looks like this. Now, obviously that's still a little too static. So, on the very middle keyframe, where it's thrown out way to one side, we're going to grab the top, and with the XY thing, rotate it this way, and rotate the bottom that way as well. So now you have it, at least from the top view, now it sways left and right pleasingly. However, from down here, it still looks odd, sticking flat out all the time. Easy solution, we grab the top of the cape. Whenever he's raised up on the highest point of his run, we're going to lower it. And when he's falling back down, we're going to raise it up again. Just like that. Again, highlight keyframe right here, so that way you can see what's high and what's low. We want the very beginning and the very ends to be low. We want the middle to be low as well. In between these, we want it to be high. And there's your extremely basic animated cape. What you would do here is actually you would go in afterwards and animate the back of the cape to flap independently. And you would kind of spice it up by tilting it here and there. Oh, well, that's messed it up. You can't overdo it and lose quality for it. So I'm just going to hit Control Z to undo that. And yeah, I'm going to grab this, bend it over here. So that way, from top down, it really does swing with his motions. Alright, and that's how you would animate a cape, at least in a running animation. Finally, I'm going to show you a shortcut to animate with a bow and arrow. So for now, we're going to grab his swords and move these up and away for safekeeping. And you've seen it already, we're going to grab the bow and arrow up here and drag these down. Now from down here, we're going to grab the arrow that's in his offhand, detach that as a separate geoset. Good. Now under bones, we're going to create a bone for the arrow in his offhand right here. Bind it, and tie it to his wrist here. The actual bow we will just bind to his hand. We don't need to get fancy with the binding there. From the side view, select the very center of the string, right here. Create a bone there, and just call this string. Bind that, and attach it to the wrist. Now select the other arrow, the one that's knocked on the bow, and give it a bone as well. And bind that to the string. Okay, so back in animations, we're going to create an animation. You'll see this error, that's okay. That's just it being fuzzy. So go here, go down to new. Now at the top right here, you'll see it says 220,000 to 220,010. This is basically the shortest fraction of a second. 1 second in animation time is 1,000 frames. And we want a 2-second animation, so we're going to change this to read 2,000. Alright, hit enter. There you go. So now we're going to make our footman shoot a bow. I'm going to animate him to hold the bow right, and then show you exactly what the trick is. You can see right there, it's moving his other sword. Alright. Now, with all the geosets visible, this is how a bow shooting animation would begin. We're going to copy that, paste it at the ends down here. That way we have identical beginning and ending frames. And just in right here, we're going to have this arm reach up and over towards the quiver. Now here, we're going to grab right wrist and tilt it. That way the arrow is lined up with the quiver. It doesn't need to be perfect. And we're going to tilt this arm down a bit while he's doing that. So that's one keyframe done. Next, we're going to have him knock the arrow here. So we're going to put the arm there, rotate this one over. We want these to line up pretty much as close as possible. Alright, something like that. And we're going to have him draw the bow. Keep in mind, we want this second arrow here to be where it is right now. That's okay, it's supposed to be showing right now. And if your arrow is too short, like mine clearly is right here, you can change that in the mesh afterwards. Just grab the bowstring here. We're going to give that a little wiggle to bake it in right here. Back here, we're going to do the same thing, just to make sure that it has like a movement data in both of these keyframes. And this second one, we're going to drag it all the way back here. And I suppose we can rotate it up a little bit to align the arrows. Just make sure that the bowstring is in his hand when he draws. So that's keyframe 3 done. And the final one is only going to be right here. All we do here is just snap the bowstring forwards and raise his backhand up and out like that. So you should be left, like all the basic motions should look like this when it's played. Now we're going to refine this a little bit by making the string wiggle a bit. Actually, no, what we're going to copy this frame and paste it here. So that way it's a lot more, wham, it's a lot faster. And we're going to move the string back and forth a little less and a little less. So you get that effect on it now. Again, that's only moving the string forwards and backwards. Now we're going to make the arrows show and only appear when they absolutely should. So arrow on bow. We're going to press this button right here, scale. Press Z and shrink it down to absolutely virtually nothing. Yeah, so you want all of these to read 0 on frame number 1. And keep them saying 0 up until this frame right here. So between these, you don't need to touch any of these as long as this one and this one are both 0. And as he fires the bow, we're going to increase the size of that up to about 100, only for one frame, and immediately afterwards, like right there, shrink it back down to nothing. And on the ending keyframe, again, make sure it says nothing up here. Now, with the bow in his hand, we're going to select that. All right. Ending frame, we're going to shrink that down to nothing. So that way, the arrow is invisible. Make sure that's the case on the front frame, the beginning frame right here. And when he goes up to reach behind him, again, make sure that starts off as 0. And as he brings it up to knock it, increase it to 100. Keep it at 100 again as he draws it all the way. And as he fires, like right about here, you see where right about here, you'll see the small arrow is actually, growing right there. So we want to snap this arrow into nothing at about this keyframe right here. So now, when you hit play, you'll draw an arrow and fire it, and it should move identically to how it does on the archer. And that's how you would quickly and easily take shortcuts to make sure that the arrow you draw is always attached to your hand, and the one that you fire out of the bow always is in line with the string. You don't want it to be bobbing and weaving around because you've animated it separately. So as far as the arms are concerned, this is what you would do in order to animate a bow and arrow. Right here, actually, we're going to grab this and stretch it out to 100 right there. So that way it gets to become full size the moment it's drawn. And this is what it should look like when you're done. And keep in mind, for this, we are only talking about the arms being animated here. I haven't animated the legs or the torso. You would usually do that to make him lean over or something when he's going for the arrow. Like that. And as he draws, he'd pull back a little bit. Maybe even aim a little higher. So you'd get a bit more motion out of it that way. And that's the quickest way to get the smoothest animation for firing a bow and arrow. Now, really quick, I'm just going to delete the bow and arrow and put his swords back on. If I can find them. There they are. And to make extra certain, super sure that it's going to stay where you want, copy and paste with Ctrl-C and Ctrl-V the first frame over the final frame, then do that again from the final frame onto the first frame, and save your model. Now you know how to make a custom standing animation and how to animate a cape from scratch, as well as how to animate a bow. Now hop back into War 3 Model Editor, Edit, Calculate Extents, hit Yes, File, Save. And with that, you now know the difference and purpose of roots, bones, skeletons, and refs, as well as how to modify an animation or create one from scratch. Your edit is complete and the model is stable. There's a lot more that goes into animating, mostly particles, footsteps, sounds, and fades, and I'll be going over that in the following video. Thanks for watching.